So these two panels tell the story of Henry of Fordwich, who was a young man who had a severe form of mental illness, who was cured at Becket's tomb. And Fordwich is only a short walk from Canterbury Cathedral, so he didn't have very far to come. So in the first panel, we see Henry being dragged, basically, to Becket's tomb, and he's got his hands bound behind his back. His whole body is twisted, and his cloak has twisted from back to front. And what we're seeing here is that he's raging in a fit of insanity. And Benedict says that he cried out and raged as he was brought to the tomb. It's unfortunate that Henry's head is a replacement piece, because the original piece almost certainly showed him with his hair splayed out, which is how insane people were often pictured in medieval art. However, his feet are the originals, and when you look closely, you can see that he has a very unusual type of footgear on. You can actually see his toes, so it's either a toeless kind of sock or a toeless kind of shoe, and his bare toes are visible right there. We don't really know why he's wearing this footgear, because no one else does in the Miracle Windows, except that it must be meant to show that he is insane. Now, the other feature of this panel is that there are two men who are beating Henry with sticks, and they have them up to bring them down with considerable force on poor Henry's back. And this is really a sad commentary on the lack of treatment medieval people had for the mentally ill. What we're meant to see as viewers is that Henry is so out of control that he actually has to be beaten into submission. So Henry is being brought to Becket's tomb, and you can see it there with its two openings, and it's kind of a box made out of stone. Now, this tomb is gone. It's no longer in the cathedral, but we know exactly where it was. So we know exactly where Henry would have been brought, and where all of the other pilgrims that we see at Becket's tomb in the Miracle Windows, where they would have been, and where all of these incredible dramas would have been enacted. So in the second panel, we are still at Becket's tomb, but other than that, everything has changed. If you look at Henry, now instead of fighting against his bonds, instead of struggling and twisting, what he is doing instead is kneeling. He's very composed. He's at Becket's tomb with his hands together in prayer. And if you look at his feet, that toeless footgear is now gone. He is wearing ordinary boots. Meanwhile, behind him, the two men who had been beating him are now looking on in astonishment. And I especially like that center figure with his arms splayed out as if he just cannot believe what he's seeing. The sticks that they had been using to beat Henry and the rope that had been used to tie his hands together are now no longer needed. And so they're in front of the tomb so that you can see them there. They don't need these anymore. And then my favorite part of the panel is the monk. So he had been looking on in the first panel, but in this one, he is looking down at Henry, and he has his hand on his forehead as if to say, I just cannot believe what I'm seeing. And you have to imagine that Henry was not the only insane person who was brought to Becket's tomb in hopes that they would be healed. And if you had somebody who was as wild and out of control as Henry was, and then to see them composed and looking so serene, you can imagine that that certainly would be seen as a miracle.